Well, today we're talking about the 1984 horror sci-fi film CHUD. It starts off with a lady walking a dog down a dark alley in the middle of the street for whatever reason, who walks past a smoking manhole, and exactly what you think would happen does. Remember that scene for two reasons. One, because that lady is somewhat important to the plot, and two, you're not going to see any more CHUDs for quite a long time. As the opening credits roll, you get a view of something you're going to see a lot in this movie. Filth. This movie just has a dirty, grimy type feel to it. We're then introduced to one of our four main protagonists. Why are there so many? I have no idea. It's not like they're the Avengers. But this is George Cooper. Oh wait, hey, he's from Home Alone. I know that guy. Our boy George is a professional photographer. And this is his girlfriend Lauren, who happens to be a professional model. She is, of course, one of the other protagonists in this movie, although her role is to just be stupid. Just watch what I mean. She just walks away like that shit was normal. What's wrong with this woman? And I promise you, she does dumber things later. This is our couple's landlady. She's just walking down the street minding her business when this pile of trash starts moving, so of course, she investigates. And then, yeah, what was she expecting, like puppies or something? I don't even get it. But the CHUDs have seemingly claimed another victim. Here in the police station, we meet our third protagonist. This is Captain Bosch, and he could easily have been the main protagonist of this movie by himself. He has the most motivation and probably the most common sense of any character in this movie. Here's where we meet Mrs. Monroe. She's a homeless lady accused of trying to steal a gun from a cop. Remember her, she's important.
Hey, Nap, all by yourself?
Cooper, you son of a bitch. I'm in jail. I only get one phone call. You think I want to talk to some goddamn fucking machine?
Hey, that's another guy from Home Alone. This is our fourth and final Avenger, Preacher. He runs a soup kitchen for the homeless, and he seems to genuinely care for these folks. Our boy Preacher has a previous relationship with Captain Bosch. A bunch of his friends are missing, and he called in a missing persons report.
Some of them are street people. They're probably out on the street somewhere, but I got undergrounders here. People who live underground.
I know that people live underground, so what?
So that's the people that are missing.
This is one of the underground people. He's crazy as shit. Bosch wants some information from him about some of the missing persons, but it goes just about as well as you think it does.
I know your work.
Meanwhile, back at the station, George bails out Mrs. Monroe, who has some choice words for the officers when she leaves the station.
Pigs. Suck a duck.
So there's this guy following George and Mrs. Monroe. Ignore him for now. He's just another character the movie tries to throw at you. He's really not that important. Mrs. Monroe explains to George why she tried to take the gun from the cop. She said it's not for her, it's for Victor. And she asked George if he has a gun. This guy pretty much says, screw it, I ain't going in the sewer, as Mrs. Monroe leads George further into the underground. George had previously taken pictures of the people of the underground for a story that got a lot of public attention. And that's how he's acquainted with Mrs. Monroe and many of the other folks down here.
That's the man who took your picture. You don't remember him?
This poor guy is Victor, who obviously isn't doing well. George asks what's wrong and why he needs a gun. Victor tells him it's for them, but he's not very specific.
I need a gun.
What do you want a gun for, Victor?
Shoot them.
Victor's seen better days, and now we get to see exactly why. Now we're back to Preacher and Captain Bosch. Preacher's wondering why Captain Bosch is so worried about finding a bunch of underground people. Bosch reveals that there's some above ground people missing too, and one of them is his wife.
We lose the mayor down there? Or the president? Or your mom disappear?
My wife.
At this point, we find out that the lady walking the dog at the beginning was Bosch's freaking wife. Mind-blowing, isn't it? At this point, Preacher explains to Bosch that there's been some weird stuff going on. Usually there's an EPA thing that happens every year for about a week, but this year it's been going on for 4 weeks, and it's still going on. Bosch is intrigued, so he agrees to go down in the sewers and take a look.
What is it?
like a Geiger counter.
I told you there's something going on.
They turn on this Geiger counter and it starts to go crazy. That's when they realize there's something really, really strange going on. And then they hear this. George comes back home from the sewer with a fresh set of pictures he needs to develop. Lauren tells him that she's pregnant, which literally has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. Let's keep moving. At this point, you're probably wondering, when the hell am I going to see a CHUD? Well, we're about 30 minutes deep into a 90-minute movie, and you finally get to see one. So now this poor little girl, who probably needs a therapist, is trying to explain to the cops that a monster took her grandfather. Bosch has enough sense to know that something weird's going on. So he orders cops posted at all the street corners within a 10-block radius of the area of the disappearances. Bosch and Preacher have also scheduled a meeting with the chief and a rep from the EPA, who just looks like a worm. We cut to our favorite couple having a good time in the park when they're approached by Murphy. He's a freelance reporter who knows that there's something weird going on with the EPA and the city. He knows there's some kind of cover-up and he's trying to get information, but the cops won't tell him anything. He also knows that George is acquainted with the people of the underground and he may be able to help him get some information. Back to the meeting.
That story that leaked out about us wanting to transport radioactive materials through Manhattan.
Didn't somebody get a court order restraining you from doing it?
That's right. The case is still under appeal. In the meantime, we can't move the stuff.
At this point, Preacher asks what this has to do with the missing people underground.
Well, now, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to him.
At this point, Preacher realizes this human weasel is lying, and he's probably seen the monsters. So, he threatens to go to the papers about it.
Come on, buddy. Have a nice day.
It just so happens that some of the papers Preacher flung across the room are classified documents with the acronym CHUD written on them.
Two gas company guys just found it. A cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller. A CHUD, all right?
When Preacher threatened to go to the press, the government asshole sent another government asshole to follow him. And then he does something just absolutely disgusting. Like, dude, what's wrong with you? You're going to get dysentery or something. Did I mention the government guy's name is Wilson? It doesn't matter, he's an asshole. But anyway, they're all here to see the dead CHUD that apparently died from a gas leak down in the sewers. From here, government asshole Wilson assumes that that's the only CHUD and it's dead. While boy Bosch knows better. Wilson wants to send some guys down in the sewers to make sure, clean up any contamination. Bosch wants to send some of his own guys down with flamethrowers. Wilson says no, Bosch says kiss my ass, and sends his guys down anyway. All hell breaks loose in the sewers in a scene reminiscent from Aliens, except for the fact this movie predates Aliens.
Parker! Parker!
I've got to go along with Bosch now, Wilson. The people have to be warned.
Of course, Wilson ain't trying to hear that shit because he just wants to maintain the cover-up, no matter the cost. Something I neglected to mention earlier was that Bosch and Preacher broke into George's apartment and stole some of the pictures of Victor's disgusting leg. And now he's realizing those pictures are missing because he was going to hand them over to the reporter Murphy. The fact that this movie has so many characters to keep up with almost distracts you from the fact that there's hardly any CHUDs in it. But Murphy and George hit the sewers to try to get as much information as they can. Of course, Murphy comes with a gun, which means you know he's going to die. Meanwhile, Preacher wants to warn some of his underground people to get out because it's too dangerous. But as it turns out, he was a bit too late. And one of the G-men has now trapped him in the sewer. We catch back up with George and Murphy, and right on cue, Murphy eats it.
Shit!
Back to Preacher, realizing he's trapped, he's trying to find another way out of the underground. He has a Geiger counter and he's using it to his advantage. And then he stumbles upon a group of CHUDs having praise and worship over a pile of toxic sludge. Wisely, he doesn't stick around. Now back to this genius. You remember that basement hatch from earlier with the scratchy noises that she just ignored? Well, for some reason, now she wants to investigate. She goes down and she ends up finding the dead dog from the beginning of the movie. She goes back upstairs to report the dead dog to the police, but she leaves the hatch unlocked like a genius. Back to Bosch, and now his worst fears have been realized.
My God, it's his wife.
Get him out of there!
Come on, come on, come on!
Now that Lauren's given the CHUDs free access to the building, she decides it's probably a good time to go take a shower. While in the shower, she has a clogged drain. She tries to clear it, and if any plumbers are watching, please explain how this is possible. John Goodman shows up in a small part just long enough to eat a burger. Well, now the secret's pretty much out. The CHUDs are in these streets. Cooper's still wandering around in the sewers, where he finds half of Victor. And if you haven't figured it out by now, the toxic sludge is turning the homeless people into CHUDs. Luckily, George grabbed that gun that Murphy dropped. Mrs. Moreau thinks George killed her brother, and then our boy Preacher shows up just in time to save him. Now they just need to find a way out. Back to Bosch, and he's had just about enough of Gutman asshole.
My wife is dead because of you, you son of a bitch! Easy, Bosch, easy. This is your responsibility, Wilson! Someone's gonna stop you, it's gonna have to be me!
Wilson starts to go through with his plan to block off the sewers and start pumping gas. Anyone that's trapped down there is going to die. Our favorite genius tries to leave her apartment when she realizes she's trapped by a CHUD that she let in. Initially, she makes the right move by trying to call the cops. And then she rips the freaking cord out of the phone like an idiot. And then why is she trying to stick it back in there? Did she think that was going to work? Did she think the phone was a grenade? I don't understand. So now she decides to just barricade herself in the apartment. Back to people we actually care about. George and Preacher are trying to get out, and they realize that they're trapped because of Wilson's plan. So they find the dead government guy's camera, and they start broadcasting to get some help.
Is anybody there?
Get Captain Bosch.
Anybody? Keep going. Just keep talking. Get Captain.
Who the hell are you?
Hey, I got somebody.
Back to this chick again. The CHUD breaks in. She tries to escape, but she's not quite fast enough. Then, for reasons that aren't explained, the CHUD's neck starts to stretch, as if he's looking for her without actually walking. And somehow this bonehead is the only person in the movie that kills a CHUD in one-on-one combat. Bosch pinpoints our fella's locations and figures out a way to come get them. Lauren commits a felony so that she can drive to the scene of the restaurant massacre from earlier. She wants to warn the cops that her husband is in the sewer and that they need to stop the gas. Bosch calls out Wilson on all his bullshit and lets Wilson know that he found out the actual meaning of the acronym CHUD.
Well, I know what CHUD stands for. Cannibalistic my ass. Contamination Hazard Urban Disposal.
Bosch threatens to expose Wilson, so Wilson pulls out a gun and threatens to kill Bosch if he has to.
I will if I have to.
Bosch uses a star punch and drops Wilson like Glass Joe. Bosch gets the keys to move the truck to save our boys' lives just before they run out of air.
I'm here!
Yeah, this asshole wakes up from his coma and shoots Bosch in the back. Now our guys need to hurry up and escape the sewer. Lucky for our main characters, our boy Preacher is pretty quick on his feet, grabs Bosch's gun, probably takes aim at Wilson's big ass forehead, but he ends up hitting him in the chest. Well, that's it. All in all, CHUD's a pretty good movie. If you go into it thinking you're going to see a lot of CHUDs, you're not. You'll probably be disappointed in that. Otherwise, this movie really isn't that bad. It seems like the idea and the story were just a little far above the budget, but otherwise, it's a pretty good movie. Thanks for watching.